Hi there, I'm Eli Sipka, and this is the Apatros Review. Now in this episode, this is basically part 3 of the D Spectrum 11, which is the special I'm doing to mark my 275th episode by reviewing all the crappy movies I've covered in the past 25 episodes. And in already parts 1 and 2 I've covered 10 of them, so the last 5 films for the previous 25 episodes are covered in this one. Yeah, okay, and in case you're wondering what is the D Spectrum, it's basically where I recount all the crappy films I've done in the previous 25 episodes. Films that I've given a D+, which is a 3 out of 10 meaning it's disappointing, to a D, which is a 2 out of 10 meaning it's bad, or a D-, which means it's 1 out of 10, which is atrocious. Now, let's start off with Red, White and Blue, directed by Simon Rumley in the year 2010. I gave this one a D-, 1 out of 10. It's atrocious. An extremely morally bankrupt, promiscuous woman who makes it her mission to spread HIV to as many men as she can sleep with during her regular routine one-night stands, finally meets her end when a musician discovers she had infected him with HIV, and he and his mates finally do her in. But they're in for a shock when the bitch's best friend, an expert CIA interrogator who served in the Iraq War, finds out she's dead and decides to deliver some misguided but nevertheless effectively brutal revenge. One of those indie flicks that made the rage of the horror indie crowd when it came out, this shot-on-digital video piece of full-blown nastiness is exactly the kind of thing that gives the horror genre a bad name with the moralists out there who point to films like this when they claim the horror movies are bad for society. I know that many horror fans naturally flock to a film like Red, White and Blue for its disturbing visuals and nasty violence. Although this ain't a gore fest, so gorehounds won't be satisfied with this, despite some of the violent acts being really brutal but left almost entirely off-screen with only brief depictions of blood to show what is going on. But if you stop to think about the details of the plot, then you will find just how deficit of a soul this movie really has. The number one rule of any horror movie is to have a character the audience can place their sympathy on so the horror is effective, since you feel for the character and don't want them to get hurt. This film doesn't do that. In fact, there are no characters here that elicit any sort of sympathy whatsoever. Everybody makes the wrong choice here, from the musician's mother who takes her own life, to the interrogator friend who, and I'm not making this up, actually asks a victim's young daughter whether she wants to live without her parents or to die with them. Yeah, it's that special kind of sick movie that people like Mary Whitehouse or Fred Nile used to tear the horror genre a new asshole doesn't deserve. I hated this unholy movie with a passion. Hard Rock Zombies, directed by Krishna Shah in the year 1985. I gave this one a D-, 1 out of 10, it's atrocious. In obscurity from the 1980s, this tells a stereotypical 1980s hair metal band, whose music is so soft it makes Europe sound like Slayer, who find themselves spectacularly iced by a band of Yahtzees, led by an elderly Mr. H, who faked his death during the fall of Berlin, but their frontman having the foresight to record a song of occult lyrics on audio cassette, which is played at their graves, breaking them back from the dead zombies with white makeup making them look like the zombie version of Kiss, so they can kick Yahtzee ass and play the do-or-die audition for a talent scout, is utterly ridiculous at best. With the goofy humor, it could have been a contender for a so bad it's good type of movie, but the frontman's inappropriate relationship with an underage female fan puts it squarely in the shitter. Bloodfists 2050, directed by Siri H. Santiago in the year 2005. I gave this one a D+, 3 out of 10. It's disappointing. And equal to the original in terms of quality telepic remake of the cult classic Bloodfist, only set in the year 2050 when an army deserter named Alex Danko arrives in a shithole Los Angeles, where most of the locals are Filipino, kids play with used syringes in the streets to avenge the death of his brother by entering the pit, an underground freestyle fighting tournament, and flashing out a killer. Dodgy, tacky, filled with an overabundance of nudity and strip routines, and predictable to the point you can correctly guess the whole plot by the 10-minute mark, even sooner if you know this is identical to the basic plot of the original Bloodfist, only set in the future. This is not a competent film by any means, but the decent fighting and constant women's wobbly bits on display gives us an agreeably trashy feel. Bloodfist 6 Ground Zero, directed by Rick Jacobson in 1994. I give this one a D, 2 out of 10, it's bad. The sixth in the original line of Bloodfist films, this has Donald Dragon Wilson playing Air Force courier and former Special Forces commando, who is trapped inside lockdown nuclear missile base fighting Islamic terrorists who plan on using the base's complement nuclear ICBMs to launch the greatest terrorist attack in history by nuking New York. On a par with Bloodfist 4 Die Trying is the worst of the Bloodfist films, this cheap and tacky Die Hard clone is pretty damn awful, but isn't exactly terrible as the constant action is normally effective in a rudimentary way. And now for the final film in this list, Children of the Living Dead, directed by Tor Ramsey in the year 2001. I give this one a D-, 1 out of 10. It's atrocious. One of the very worst zombie films ever made, and the worst zombie film to ever cash in a good name George A. Romero, despite his lack of involvement in this ripoff. This was only possible for this split copyright where John Russo owned half the rights and used his half to mount increasingly reasonable alternate sequels over the years, even a comic book series, including a deeply controversial remake of the original film by simply shooting new footage and editing them into the original film, which all Romero fans detested. This 2001 production was painfully low budget, only a $500,000 budget, and an inept producer who was suffering from the E.L. James effect, and who was micromanaging the production, making sure nobody questioned the atrocious quality of the script. But even despite that, the rookie director managed to offend her with his work print, causing her to re-edit the film in post-production and make it even worse than the infamous 30th anniversary edition of The Living Dead, the Russo remake. That being said, despite the rock-bottom ineptness on display here, I would be willing to see the work print if it ever surfaces. The implication being that Ramsey may have created a reasonable zombie film if it wasn't for the infernal meddling of Karen Lee Wolf. Okay, so that's basically the 11th installment of D Spectrum. Done for now, and the 12th one will come pretty much at the end of the year. I hope you found this trip through the bowels of my personal DVD collection to be just as interesting as the previous ones. Keep watching the Apatros review for more reviews, and if you're a bad movie masochist, don't worry, more bad movies to come. Now, I did not do requests, but if you have any questions about DVDs or films, then I'll be happy to answer. Just hit me up, give me a line in the comment section, and I'll be happy to check it out for you. Hope you guys are staying safe, take it easy, and that's it for this review. See ya.